The transport pod's door hissed open, expelling Mira onto the rocky surface of Nexus 9. She stumbled forward on unsteady legs, her luminescent skin flickering with fear and despair. Behind her, Commander Vexus stood in the doorway, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh light of the distant sun. "The hierarchy has been merciful," he said, voice devoid of emotion. "Your defective genetics could have warranted termination, but instead, you are merely exiled." His upper eyes narrowed while his lower set scanned the desolate landscape. Though perhaps this is not mercy after all. Mira's translucent outer membrane trembled, but she refused to show further weakness. "My only defect was being born different," she whispered, her voice carrying the melodic undertones characteristic of the Luminari species. Vexus made a dismissive gesture. "A Luminari who cannot channel energy for defense is worthless. Your healing abilities and emotional sensitivity are evolutionary throwbacks, useless traits that weaken our collective." He stepped back into the pod. "The next supply vessel passes in 60 cycles. You won't survive to see it." The pod sealed shut and lifted away, leaving nothing but swirling dust and silence. Mira watched until the vessel disappeared into the atmosphere, then sank to her knees. Nexus 9 was a barren mining outpost, abandoned decades ago when its resources were depleted. Nothing grew here, nothing lived here. The hierarchy had chosen well for her execution by exile. Her inner light, the bioluminescence that coursed through all Luminari, dimmed as she surveyed her surroundings. Jagged rock formations stretched toward a copper-colored sky. The thin atmosphere would sustain her, but barely. There was no water visible, no shelter, no hope. For 3 days, Mira wandered. Her specialized biology allowed her to absorb limited nutrients from the mineral-rich rocks, but it wasn't enough. Her light grew fainter with each passing hour. On the 4th day, she found an outcropping that offered some protection from the harsh winds and curled beneath it. "So this is how it ends," she murmured to herself, watching her weakening glow reflect against the stone. Among her people, she had always been considered strange, a healer when warriors were needed, empathic when emotional detachment was valued. Her former mate, Dravik, had been the one to finally report her to the Genetic Council, claiming her defective nature threatened their future offspring. As Mira closed her eyes, accepting what seemed inevitable, a thunderous boom shook the ground. She lifted her head weakly, expecting to see a storm, but instead watched with disbelief as a small craft plummeted from the sky, trailing smoke and debris before crashing 2 kilometers away. Every instinct told her to stay hidden. It could be dangerous, or worse, more of her kind returning to confirm her death. But beneath that fear sparked something else, curiosity. No ships were scheduled to arrive for weeks. Using the outcropping for support, Mira rose on shaky legs. If she was going to die anyway, what did it matter if she investigated? Each step required monumental effort as she navigated the treacherous terrain toward the crash site. What she found changed everything. The vessel was unlike anything in the Luminari fleet, smaller, more angular, with unfamiliar markings. Smoke poured from a gash in its side. As Mira approached cautiously, a section of the hull slid open, and a figure stumbled out, coughing violently. He was no Luminari. Where her people were tall and luminescent with 4 arms and reflective skin, this being was shorter, solid, with only 2 arms and covered in some kind of protective suit. When he removed his helmet, Mira gasped. His face was unlike any species she'd encountered, no outer membrane, skin a rich brown color, with peculiar fur above his eyes and on top of his head. The being spotted her and froze. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, 2 stranded souls on a desolate world. Then he spoke, his translator converting his words to something she could understand. "I'm Kieran Chen," he said cautiously. "Human research scientist. My ship." He gestured to the smoking wreckage. "I could use some help." Mira's inner light pulsed slightly brighter with surprise. No one had ever asked for her help before. The human called Kieran approached Mira with slow, deliberate steps, his hands raised in what she recognized as a universal gesture of peace. She remained motionless, her luminescence fluctuating with uncertainty. "You're Luminari," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I've studied your species, but I've never actually met one." His eyes, a rich amber color, studied her with undisguised fascination rather than the disgust she'd grown accustomed to from her own kind. "You know of us?" Mira's voice wavered, her translator converting her melodic tones into something comprehensible to him. Kieran nodded. "Xenobiologist. I specialize in comparative physiology across sentient species." He gestured at the smoking ruins of his ship. "Was mapping the outer systems when my navigation system failed." He paused, studying her more carefully. "Your bioluminescence is dimmer than what my research indicates is normal. Are you injured?" Mira instinctively wrapped her forearms around herself, the upper pair crossing protectively over her chest, the lower around her abdomen. "I am unwanted. Exiled. Left to die." "Because you're injured?" "Because I am defective." The words came out bitter, rehearsed from years of hearing them. "My energy cannot form weapons. I cannot fight. I can only heal and feel." She spat the last word as if it were poison. Kieran's expression shifted to one she couldn't quite interpret. "Your species considers healing a defect?" He shook his head, running a hand through his dark, curly hair. "Look, I don't know the politics here, but I could use someone with healing abilities. My medical supplies were damaged in the crash." He turned, revealing a deep laceration along his shoulder blade that had soaked through his suit. "And I'm guessing you could use shelter and supplies. My ship's communications are fried, but the habitat module is intact. Enough rations for weeks." Mira's inner light pulsed with hesitation. Everything she'd been taught warned against trusting outsiders, yet here was one offering exactly what she needed to survive. "You would share your resources with me?" The concept seemed foreign after a lifetime in a society where weakness was abandoned, not supported. "Call it mutual aid. Humans are social creatures. We survive better together than alone." Kieran winced as he moved his injured shoulder. "So? Partners?" "Partners," Mira agreed cautiously, the translator giving her lilting voice a solemn quality. The next few days established their tentative rhythm. The habitat module was small by Luminari standards but ingeniously designed, with deployable sections that expanded into a modest living space. Kieran showed her how to operate the water reclamation system and shared his rations, nutrient-dense bars that her physiology could process, if not enjoy. In return, Mira tended to his wound. The first time she laid her upper hands on his injured shoulder, Kieran watched in amazement as her skin took on a golden hue, transferring healing energy directly into his damaged tissue. "Extraordinary," he murmured as the pain visibly eased. "The cellular regeneration is happening at triple the normal human rate." "It is nothing," Mira replied automatically, retreating into herself. "Among my people, warriors who can project this energy outward as weapons are valued. Those like me, who can only direct it inward for healing, are considered useless throwbacks to our evolutionary past." Kieran's brow furrowed. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Do your people never get injured? Never get sick?" "Of course they do. But our medical technology handles that. Personal healing abilities became obsolete generations ago." She dimmed slightly. "At least, that's what I was taught." On the seventh day, as they ventured outside to salvage more equipment from Kieran's ship, Mira finally asked the question that had been troubling her. "Why are you being kind to me? You gain nothing but basic medical care." Kieran paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow. The harsh sunlight cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting the growing stubble along his jaw. "Is kindness so strange where you come from?" Mira woke to the sound of labored breathing. The habitat module was still dark, illuminated only by the gentle pulse of her own bioluminescence. She found Kieran tangled in his sleeping pad, his body trembling despite the climate controls maintaining a comfortable temperature. "Kieran?" She approached cautiously, extending one of her upper limbs to touch his forehead. The contact caused her to recoil, his skin burned with fever, far beyond the normal human baseline he had explained to her. "Cold," he mumbled, eyes fluttering open but unfocused. "So cold." His teeth chattered violently as sweat beaded across his brow. Mira's inner light flickered with alarm. She had studied human physiology through their conversations and Kieran's database, but this rapid deterioration was unexpected. Quickly, she accessed the medical scanner Kieran had shown her how to use. The readout confirmed her fears. His body temperature was dangerously elevated, heart rate erratic, blood oxygen levels declining. The scanner detected an unknown pathogen in his bloodstream, likely something native to Nexus 9 that had entered through his healing shoulder wound. "Kieran, you need medicine." She searched through their meager medical supplies, but found nothing specifically designed to combat unknown alien pathogens. The few broad-spectrum antibiotics they had wouldn't be enough. The infection was spreading too rapidly. His breathing grew more strained. "Emergency protocols," he gasped, pointing weakly toward the ship's computer terminal. "Stasis, until rescue." Mira accessed the system, her 4 hands working simultaneously across the controls. The habitat module did indeed have a small medical stasis chamber, designed to suspend biological functions in critical emergencies until proper treatment could be administered. But the readout showed damage to the unit's power coupling from the crash. Stasis wasn't an option. Rescue was still potentially weeks away. "Hold on," she whispered, making a decision. "I can help you." Kieran's eyes rolled back as the fever spiked higher. He was losing consciousness. Time was running out. Mira carefully removed his sweat-soaked shirt and placed all 4 of her hands on him, her upper pair on his chest and forehead, her lower pair on his abdomen and injured shoulder. She closed her eyes and concentrated, focusing inward on the energy that flowed through her being. Among the Luminari, healing was a simple redirection of personal energy, a basic ability considered primitive compared to the warrior's capacity to project that same energy outwardly as weapons. Mira had never attempted to heal anyone besides herself, such intimacy was forbidden for one of her defective status. But here, with Kieran's life fading beneath her touch, those prohibitions meant nothing. Her luminescence intensified, shifting from its typical pearlescent blue to a deep, concentrated gold that bathed the entire module in warm light. The energy flowed through her upper membrane and into Kieran's body, seeking out the invading pathogens, strengthening his immune response, repairing damaged tissues. Hours passed. Mira remained motionless, channeling everything she had into him. Her own energy reserves depleted dangerously, her outer membrane becoming almost transparent as she redirected her life force. Still, she persisted, following the infection through his bloodstream, isolating and neutralizing it cell by cell. Just before dawn, Kieran's fever broke. His breathing steadied, and his heartbeat returned to normal rhythm. Only then did Mira allow herself to collapse beside him, her luminescence dimmed to a barely visible glimmer. She drifted in and out of consciousness throughout the day. Occasionally, she felt a gentle hand checking her pulse points or placing hydration packets near her mouth. By nightfall, she had absorbed enough nutrients to restore her outer membrane, though her light remained dim. When she finally regained full awareness, she found Kieran sitting beside her, his amber eyes filled with wonderment and concern. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "The scanner shows no trace of the pathogen. It should have killed me." Mira attempted to rise, but her limbs felt heavy. "It was just healing. Nothing special." Nothing special? Kieran's voice rose with emotion. Mira, what you did goes beyond any medical technology I've ever studied. You literally transferred your own life energy to combat an unknown alien infection and completely eliminated it. He shook his head in disbelief. And your people consider this ability worthless? It's just not warrior energy, she replied weakly, the old conditioning still ingrained despite everything. Kieran took one of her hands in his, a startlingly intimate gesture that sent unexpected warmth through her depleted system. What I saw wasn't weakness, Mira. It was one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of strength I've ever witnessed. That night, as Mira's energy slowly regenerated, they talked for hours. Kieran explained how on Earth, healers were revered, not rejected, how countless human civilizations had honored those with the ability to mend bodies and spirits. In turn, Mira revealed more about Luminari society, about the increasing militarization over generations that had shifted their values toward conquest rather than connection. I never felt part of my own world, she admitted, her voice soft in the darkness. Even before my exile, I was separate. Different. Different isn't defective, Kieran said firmly. Different is just different. As they talked, their physical proximity gradually increased, drawn together by something neither fully understood but both increasingly craved. When Kieran's hand tentatively brushed against the sensitive area where her upper and lower arms connected, a touch that would have been forbidden among her own kind, Mira didn't pull away. Instead, her luminescence responded, shifting to a deep, pulsing magenta that reflected her confusion, vulnerability, and newfound desire. The color change startled her, it was an emotional response she'd never experienced before. Your light, Kieran whispered, fascinated. It's beautiful. His face was close now, his expression open with awe and something more, something that made Mira's 4 hearts beat in a rapid, syncopated rhythm. When he leaned forward hesitantly, she met him halfway, her outer membrane tingling as their lips touched. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, bridging the vast biological and cultural differences between them. Mira's luminescence burst into patterns of color neither had seen before, purples and golds intermingling in swirling, hypnotic displays that filled the module with ethereal light. As they separated, both breathless and stunned by the intensity of their connection, Mira realized that for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not for what she lacked, but for what she uniquely offered. In Kieran's eyes, reflected in the light of her own being, she glimpsed not worthlessness, but wonder. The warning alarm jolted them awake. Kieran rolled from their shared sleeping space, immediately alert as he checked the habitat's external sensors. Spacecraft approaching, he announced, voice tense. Entering orbit. Not matching any Earth alliance or trading partner configurations. Mira's luminescence dimmed instinctively with fear. She joined him at the console, her 4 hands trembling as she saw the unmistakable crystalline structure of a Luminari vessel displayed on the screen. They're early, she whispered. The supply vessel wasn't due for another 2 weeks. Supply vessel? Kieran turned to her, confusion evident. You mean they weren't planning to leave you here permanently? Mira's outer membrane paled to a translucent gray. They come to confirm death, not bring supplies. Commander Vexus said I wouldn't survive to see the next ship. They've come to collect my remains for genetic study, to understand the defect and prevent it in future generations. Kieran's expression hardened. Well, they're going to be disappointed. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We have options. We can hide in the caves we mapped last week, wait for them to leave. Mira shook her head. Their scanners will detect both our life signs. They'll find us. The vessel descended through the atmosphere with precise, controlled movements. Even from a distance, Mira recognized the sleek lines of a genetic council ship, smaller than a transport pod but heavily armed. A retrieval team, then. Not just scientists, but enforcers. Kieran, she said urgently, you must leave. Take the emergency beacon and head for the northern ridge. The mineral deposits will mask your signature long enough for you to activate it safely. I'm not leaving you, he replied firmly. You don't understand. The Luminari don't tolerate interference with their judgments. If they find you here with me, alive, they'll consider you contaminated by my defect. Her voice broke. They'll eliminate both of us. Before Kieran could argue further, the habitat's external camera captured the landing ship's hatch opening. 3 tall, luminescent figures emerged, their outer membranes gleaming with the metallic sheen that marked high-ranking Luminari warriors. Leading them was a figure Mira recognized instantly, Dravik, her former mate, whose ambitious rise through the hierarchy had been threatened by his association with her defective genetics. That's why they're early, she whispered. Dravik secured a promotion to the Genetic Council. He's come personally to verify my death. Kieran's jaw clenched as he looked between the approaching Luminari and Mira's trembling form. Whatever happens, we face it together, he said, squeezing her hand. I've seen what you can do. They have no idea what they're up against. His confidence stirred something within her, a flicker of defiance she'd never dared feel before. Her luminescence shifted, the fearful gray giving way to a determined amber glow. Stay behind me, she instructed, moving toward the habitat entrance. Their energy weapons can't penetrate my membrane, but they'll cut through human tissue instantly. The habitat door slid open, and Mira stepped out into the harsh daylight of Nexus 9, Kieran positioned carefully behind her. The 3 Luminari warriors stopped abruptly, their forearmed silhouettes rigid with surprise. Impossible, Dravik's voice carried across the rocky terrain, his translator converting his melodic tones to standard language. You should be dead. Sorry to disappoint, Mira replied, her luminescence steady now, almost radiant. Dravik approached, his upper eyes narrowed suspiciously while his lower set scanned her vital signs. The 2 warriors flanking him held energy projectors, weapons that channeled their natural abilities into focused beams capable of disintegrating matter. You've always been stubborn, Dravik said, stopping several meters away. But survival alone doesn't change your status, Mira. The Council's judgment stands. His attention shifted to Kieran, visible behind her. You've allied with a lesser species? How predictably pathetic. Kieran stepped forward, despite Mira's protective stance. There's nothing lesser about compassion or healing. Your society's values are fundamentally flawed if they can't recognize Mira's gifts. Dravik's luminescence flared with anger, a harsh purple that signaled aggressive intent. A human presumes to lecture a member of the Genetic Council? Your ignorance is only exceeded by your arrogance. He gestured to his companions. Take them both. The human will provide interesting comparative data before disposal. The warriors advanced, their energy projectors powering up with an ominous hum. Mira felt Kieran tense behind her, ready to fight despite the impossible odds. But something had changed within her. The weeks with Kieran, his unwavering belief in her worth, the intimate connection they'd forged, it had awakened something dormant, something powerful. No, she said simply, her voice carrying a resonance that made all 3 Luminari pause. Her luminescence intensified, shifting from amber to a brilliant white gold that seemed to draw light from the air itself. Her forearms extended outward, palms facing her approaching kin. I am not defective, she declared. I'm evolved. What you call weakness, I now recognize as strength. Dravik laughed dismissively, though his warriors hesitated. Your delusions have only grown during your exile. What exactly do you think you can do against 3 elite warriors? You can't even project energy. Can't I? Mira's voice remained calm as her luminescence gathered, concentrating around her hands. The transformation that followed astonished everyone, including Mira herself. The healing energy she had always directed inward now flowed outward, not as a destructive force but as a powerful field that enveloped the area between them. When the first warrior fired his weapon, the energy beam struck her field and dissipated harmlessly. Dravik's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. You're a healer, not a projector. Mira advanced now, her protective field moving with her. I've learned that the energy is the same, it's the intent that differs. You channel rage and dominance. I channel protection and life. Her field expanded, gently pushing the warriors backward despite their resistance. Which do you think is truly stronger? As the standoff intensified, the second warrior impulsively fired directly at Kiran. Mira reacted instantaneously, her field contracting around him like a second skin, absorbing the deadly beam completely. The demonstration silenced even Dravik. To project a protective field was rare enough, to maintain one while simultaneously creating a second was unprecedented in luminary biology. What have you become? Dravik whispered, his aggression faltering. Mira's 4 arms lowered slightly, though her protection remained firmly in place. I've become what I always was, what our ancestors were before military expansion became our only value. We were healers first, Dravik. Protectors. Empaths. That's why these abilities persist in our genetics, they're not defects to be eliminated but foundations to be honored. Kiran stepped to her side now, carefully staying within her protective field. Your people stand at a crossroads, he addressed Dravik directly. Continue down the path of genetic purification and you'll lose the very diversity that ensures species survival. Or recognize that different abilities strengthen the whole. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, remarkably, Dravik signaled his warriors to lower their weapons. His luminescence shifted to a thoughtful blue as he studied Mira with new eyes. The council must witness this, he finally said. What you've demonstrated contradicts all current genetic theory. It suggests. He hesitated, the admission clearly difficult, it suggests our evaluation was flawed. As the tension gradually dissipated, Mira's protective field remained, not from fear now, but from a newfound confidence. Standing beside Kiran, their hands intertwined, she faced her former people not as a supplicant, but as living proof that worthiness couldn't be defined by rigid hierarchies or limited perspectives. For the first time in her life, she understood that her difference wasn't just acceptable, it was essential. The Luminary Council chamber gleamed with crystalline brilliance, its vaulted ceilings designed to amplify the collective bioluminescence of the 12 council members seated in a perfect circle. Mira stood at the center beside Kiran, her outer membrane shimmering with a calm, steady gold, a stark contrast to the nervous flickers that had defined her previous appearances before this assembly. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation on Nexus 9. Dravik's report had sent shockwaves through the genetic hierarchy, prompting an emergency session and Mira's immediate recall from exile. The journey aboard the council vessel had been tense but dignified, she was no longer prisoner but phenomenon, no longer defective but anomaly. The council has reviewed all evidence, announced first geneticist Thelios, her ancient luminescence pulsing with the deep blue of authority. We have analyzed the sensor readings from Commander Dravik's encounter, studied the medical scans, and observed your demonstrations under controlled conditions. Her 4 eyes, all focused on Mira, revealed nothing of her thoughts. Kiran stood close enough that Mira could feel the warmth of his presence, though they maintained the formal distance required by council protocol. His steadiness anchored her as she waited for judgment. In 4,000 cycles of recorded luminary history, Thelios continued, we have no documentation of a healer who could project protective energy fields. The ability to redirect life force both inward and outward was believed physiologically impossible. And yet she does both, interjected Dravik from his council seat, his voice carrying none of the derision it once had. I witnessed it firsthand. What we classified as defect appears to be evolution. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, the collective luminescence flickering with uncertainty and excitement. Helios raised her upper arms for silence. More significant is what you accomplished with the human. Our scientists have verified that you neutralized an unknown pathogen that should have been fatal. You adapted your healing energy to an entirely different biological system, improvised without training, and succeeded where our most advanced medical technology would likely have failed. Mira felt Kieran's eyes on her, filled with the same admiration that had first helped her recognize her own worth. The implications are profound, Helios stated, her tone carefully measured. If these abilities can be studied, understood, and perhaps even cultivated in others, our people would gain advantages far beyond military applications. Medical breakthroughs. Diplomatic possibilities. Interspecies cooperation. Her lower eyes shifted briefly to Kieran. Something our current path has not prioritized. Another council member leaned forward, his luminescence pulsing with the green of scientific inquiry. We propose your immediate integration into the Advanced Genetic Research Division. Your status would be elevated to exceptional variant, all previous judgments expunged. Your genetic material would be preserved in the evolutionary archive rather than the defect registry. Mira felt the weight of the offer, the validation she had craved her entire life, the acceptance into a society that had rejected her, the recognition of her value by those who had deemed her worthless. Yet something held her back from immediate acceptance. And what of Kieran? She asked, her voice clear in the vast chamber. What of what I've learned beyond our borders? Helios's luminescence dimmed slightly. The human would be compensated for his assistance and returned to his people. As for knowledge gained during your exile, it would be incorporated into your research contributions. Mira turned to Kieran, their eyes meeting in silent communication. Over weeks together, they had developed a connection that transcended words, something neither had anticipated but both now cherished. Council members, Mira said, turning back to face them, I am honored by your reassessment. But before I accept, I must speak freely about what my experience has taught me. Helios nodded permission, her 4 eyes intent. My exile was meant to be my end, but instead became my awakening, Mira began, her luminescence brightening with conviction. On Nexus 9, I discovered not only the extent of my abilities but their true purpose. The Luminari have spent generations perfecting warfare and genetic purity at the expense of healing and connection, the very foundations upon which our civilization was built. She gestured toward the ancient murals decorating the chamber walls, images depicting Luminari of the past using their light to nurture, not destroy. Our ancestors used their luminescence to heal worlds, not conquer them. They valued diversity because they understood it strengthened the whole. Her voice grew stronger, her light pulsing in rhythm with her words. By rejecting those born different, we haven't advanced our evolution, we've stunted it. The chamber fell silent, her heresy hanging in the air. Yet none interrupted. I stand before you not as a mistake corrected but as proof that your system of judgment is fundamentally flawed. Mira reached back, finding Kieran's hand and clasping it firmly in one of her own, a public gesture that caused several council members to flicker with shock. This human saw value where you saw defect. He offered partnership where you commanded exile. He recognized strength in compassion while you worship strength in dominance. Her 4 hearts beat in perfect synchrony as she continued, and in doing so, he helped me discover abilities that your rigid categorizations nearly erased from our species. Helios leaned forward, her ancient eyes unreadable. What are you suggesting, Mira? I'm suggesting that the Luminari need to re-examine what we consider worthy. That perhaps my case is not unique, that others deemed defective might possess gifts we've failed to recognize. She squeezed Kieran's hand gently. I'm also suggesting that isolation has cost us valuable connections with other species who might see in us what we cannot see in ourselves. Dravik's luminescence pulsed with reluctant admiration. You propose a fundamental restructuring of Luminari society based on your single case? I propose we begin asking different questions, Mira replied calmly. Starting with, what if diversity is not weakness but our greatest potential strength? A lengthy silence followed, broken only when Thelios finally spoke. The Council requires time to consider these provocative ideas. For now, we offer you a choice, Mira. Return to us with full status and privileges restored, or, she hesitated, the concept clearly uncomfortable, pursue your own path as the first luminary granted independent status in 10 generations. The offer stunned the chamber. Independent status was nearly mythical, the freedom to move between worlds, to represent oneself rather than the collective, to chart one's own course while maintaining luminary citizenship. Mira felt the crossroads before her. Return to the world that had rejected her, now with the status she'd once craved, or step into an unknown future guided by her own values rather than inherited ones. She turned to Kieran, whose expression held both love and understanding. Whatever you choose, he whispered for her alone, know that you've already changed them. You've already won. In that moment, looking into his eyes, Mira realized her worth had never been contingent on luminary approval. Her value existed independently of their judgment. Kieran had simply been the first to recognize what had always been true. I choose independence, she announced, her luminescence blazing with certainty. I will serve as bridge between our worlds. I will find others like me, those deemed worthless who might possess gifts we've failed to recognize. And I will work with those who see potential where others see only deficiency. She faced the Council with all four arms extended in the traditional gesture of respect, but with Kieran still firmly at her side, a deliberate merging of tradition and transformation. The universe is vast, she concluded, her voice strong and clear. Perhaps it's time the Luminari explored it not as conquerors seeking to reshape others in our image, but as learners ready to discover new forms of worth. 3 days later, as their small vessel broke orbit from the Luminari homeworld, Mira stood at the viewport, her luminescence reflecting against the transparency. Kieran joined her, wrapping his arm around her lower shoulders. Having second thoughts, he asked gently. She turned to him, her light shifting to the deep magenta that only he had ever witnessed, the color of her love for him. None, she replied. The Council granted research access to their exile records. There are 8 others with my defect scattered across the galaxy on various outposts. Our first destinations, Kieran nodded. And after we find them? Earth, he said simply. I want you to see oceans and forests. I want you to meet other humans who will value your gifts as I do. Mira's outer membrane tingled as she leaned into his embrace. And then? And then we keep exploring. Keep learning. Keep proving that different and worthy are not opposites but complements. His amber eyes reflected her luminescence, creating a harmony of colors that symbolized their unlikely union. Together. As their ship accelerated toward the stars, Mira felt the last vestiges of shame fall away. The Luminari had called her worthless, but one human, one extraordinary soul who saw beyond physical differences and cultural expectations, had proven them wrong.